Hey guys, my name is Mike. I'm the marketing manager here at Benchmark Tool and Supply. We're going to try things a little bit differently this go around. Rather than do our live webinars, we're decided to have a sit down with some of our partners. So today I've got Levi with Benchmark Field Services and Tyler with GSC Surveying. Levi, if you just introduce yourself real quick.
Levi, I'm with Benchmark Field Service. We do 3D modeling, some scanning work, drone flights, stuff like that kind of helps bridge that gap between GPS and being productive for a contractor.
Awesome. And Tyler with GSC.
Hey, I'm Tyler with GSC. I handle a lot of the service side of things, the more technical aspects of software as well as drone development.
So these guys are experts when it comes to being out in the field and getting work done. They've got a lot of experience when it comes to doing road scans, processing the data, and then getting that data into your paving or milling machine. So Levi, first question to you, just quickly off the top of your head, man, what is the SmoothRide system?
SmoothRide is an overall system that Topcon came out with. It encompasses basically using LiDAR data to collect the road surface. From that, we can do a lot of design, stuff like that. That goes back into the machine control to actually automate that paver or milling machine. They've put a lot of time into it. We spent a lot of time with it, and it produces really good results because we're using a lot more data than your conventional survey methods. So.
And then just in terms of like the benefits you've seen kind of diving into using the SmoothRide, what are some of the main benefits that companies can get using that whole system?
One of the main benefits to it is actually not having to send a field crew out to actually do the survey because we can actually put it on our truck. So we're scanning, setting in the safety of our vehicle. We don't have to have lane closures. We can scan with traffic, which is a huge deal in today's times. Tyler can speak a little bit to that, having to leapfrog in traffic. You don't have to do that with a scanner.
Yep.
And overall that, I mean, we put it into the paver, so we're actually going to hit our numbers. We're going to try to hit that SmoothRide to get our rideability bonus from the DOTs. It just makes the overall process easier and smoother for a contractor. We're not out there with string line, wheels, hoping for the best. So.
Okay. Actually, that's a good point. So, Tyler, you've got a lot of experience on the surveying side, and he kind of hit on that. So, as far as like the surveying piece, how do you see the benefit in SmoothRide?
The big portion of SmoothRide is that not being in the road, just being able to set control points either off the site or, close to it. It doesn't have to be right on the actual scan. And, traditionally we would go out with an instrument or a rod or a GPS, and we'd actually have to stand in the road and shoot points to get our measurements and to build these road profiles. Whereas with the SmoothRide, I mean, you can just keep on moving with traffic with the RDM1.
Okay.
We might be jumping ahead here, but to add to that, I mean, y'all do them every 50 feet down the road, your 3 shots, where with SmoothRide, we're actually, 6 or 7 inches for a cross section, shooting 300 points compared to that 5 or 6 across the road like normal.
Gotcha. Yeah, and we'll definitely dive into that piece of it, how technical we can get, how detailed you can get. So we talked a lot about the benefits of the RDM1, or the SmoothRide. So let's actually jump in and kind of get to what is the SmoothRide? What do you get with the SmoothRide? So Levi, just walk us through what you get when you purchase a Topcon SmoothRide system.
Okay, so when you purchase the Topcon SmoothRide system from Benchmark Tool and Supply, it's going to come with a LiDAR scanner. You'll get a hitch mount for your vehicles that goes into any receiver hitch. All the mounting hardware comes with the software to actually run the scanner. And then that's one piece of it. And then it comes with actually the processing software, which is called Magnet Collage. Does a lot of cool stuff with the data, allows you to manipulate it. With that, you also get what we call Magnet Office. It's actually called Magnet Construct now. It's got the resurface module in it where you do all your design work, where we can put in our specs and stuff like that for the project. And then depending on the paver or milling, which way you want to go there'll be hardware that goes onto the machine to actually automate it. And I mean, that varies up between manufacturer, machine type. If it's an existing customer already running GPS, we can use those existing components with just some software unlock and adding a few other components to it. So.
Okay. So let's dig into, really getting going with the SmoothRide system. Tyler, I know you've got a lot of experience kind of getting that system going. Can you give us a quick walkthrough of how we get that RDM1 scanner set up on the truck or the van, whatever vehicle you're using?
Yeah, so it's a really easy process. For me, I use a 2-inch regular receiver hitch on the pickup. So I can just throw the mount into the back of the truck and hang the RDM1 system on it and bolt it down just to keep it from falling, keep it safe. And I'd add a strap just to keep it from moving around. And after that, I can start up the software, set up my save location, the name, all that stuff. and just start scanning. It's extremely easy to set up. It's kind of surprising the first couple times you use it.
How many vehicles, I mean, do you have to set up a new vehicle every time? So you've got one guy who's got a truck, he needs another guy out to use a van. How many, can you save vehicles, or do you have to set up every single time you go out?
Yeah, so you actually do, the first setup, you do measurements of the vehicle that you're going to use it on. Ours is set up, we've got a few different vehicles in that profile. So if we're using one of the other trucks that has a different wheelbase or something like that, then yeah, it takes that into account, which really shows just how well Topcon has just thought about that aspect, a different vehicle needing different settings and specs for it.
Levi, can you just run us through, I mean, once you get to the job, what do you need when you're at the job site to get this system running correctly?
The first thing we're going to do when we get to the job sites, we got to set up a base station. The SmoothRide system, the LiDAR scanner, actually post-processes data, so we need something to sit there and collect that static file. So that's kind of the main thing I want to do when I get out on site, figuring out where I can put this base at, safe location, using best GPS practices. I don't want it near trees or anything like that. Adding to that, one thing that I've started doing when I'm scanning is actually setting up 2 base stations to kind of have some redundancy in there as a backup, anything like that. It doesn't require control, so that's nice. We don't actually have to set control to be able to scan with it, but we do need that base set in there. It's really easy with Topcon hardware. It's just putting an SD card in the back and holding the power button down. It puts it in a static mode, and it's just collecting data. Once we get that set up, hopefully we've already got the scanner on the truck. That's when we're actually going to start this scan. From there, it's a very simple process. We're just hitting play on the software and basically start driving.
So kind of on that play pause thing, I know you guys had a story about trying to scan a road, I think Christmas at Glenside maybe. How did that go over?
Yeah, that was fun. It was right outside of Crabtree Valley Mall, so it was a big intersection. We was doing it at Christmas time. So it's kind of nice being able to sit in the truck, not having to play leapfrog like we was talking about earlier with cars. It's a very smooth process. I mean, the only thing we would do that's where the pause button comes into play, is we'd pull up the stoplight, we could actually hit pause. That way we're not sitting there building up a bunch of data. Just simply because the lights at that intersection, you're going to sit there for a couple of minutes waiting on it. We didn't want to collect 10 million points in one spot. I don't know if Tyler has anything to add to that. He was involved with it. It was a good project.
Yeah, I mean, bumper to bumper traffic is just common any day of the year out there. So Christmas, it was horrible, and we were still able to get good data. I mean, it didn't really hold the system back at all. It's pretty nice.
That's actually kind of a good segue into when you actually start scanning. So we're on site, right? We've got it hooked up to our vehicle. We've got our base station set up too for redundancy to make sure that we can keep GPS. So let's talk about what we're actually collecting as we drive. Tyler, I'm going to start with you. When you're driving down that road, I mean, what is going on with the scanner?
So the scanner's, it's a standard rotating laser sensor. So it's actually getting points and returns from the road surface. So as you're driving, the RDM1 is taking those measurements, taking the laser measurements, it's combining it with an IMU, which tells it, which way it's facing, which way it's going, as well as a wheel encoder, which tells it your wheel speed. So that way you have a really direct line to everything that's happening with the vehicle in the scanning process. And it shows on screen, it shows where you've already been so that you can cover each area a lot easier. We'll do about 3 passes per lane just to get good coverage.
Okay. Kind of adding to that, with that RDM1 scanner, Topcon mounted the LiDAR facing downward. So it's actually not collecting all that information out on the side of the ditch, the building facade, stuff like that we don't need, because we're just worried about what's going on in that road surface from right away to right away, basically. So.
Now you guys mentioned doing it 3 times. Are you running the same strip of road, or are you guys kind of offsetting your vehicle? How do you guys collect the best data?
I normally offset it, so I'll follow the white line the first pass, try to hit the middle of the lane the second pass, and third pass try to run that center line. And that way I'm kind of getting the offset data all the way through there. That way I'm collecting more points, because the kind of the theory behind it is each time I move over, that cross section is not going to hit the exact same spot it did from the previous pass. And that's worked really well for us. And kind of adding to what Tyler said, using that paint on the screen lets us know where we've been. And Topcon did a really good job with the software, because they put in some counter pass counts. So I can set that point A, and as I drive past it, it tells me, hey, you've been by here 3 times, so I know that I've done what I needed to do.
So I mean, you got the scanner on the back of the truck. How is it powered? How does that scanner get power?
So it uses just standard 12-volt power plug. like you plug a phone charger or something like that into in your car. And its communication is through an Ethernet cable. So you can plug that into a laptop or the FC6000. Does it have a built-in Ethernet, or you
It
need
does
a
not. You
dongle?
got to have the Ethernet adapter to make
Okay.
that work.
But so I use a 5000. It's an older model, but the 10-hour battery life, when you're doing a big scan, if you end up having to be out there for that long, it's really nice to just have that data collector set up. That, and it's a lot easier to maneuver in a truck and not have a laptop sliding around.
Gotcha. Yeah, it probably makes it easier to do it by yourself versus having to have somebody hold a laptop. Hip pause.
Yeah, I mean, if you got to do it by yourself, the 5000 would definitely be a better way to do it. I know me and Tyler scanned some together in the past, and I'm on a laptop or he's on a laptop, and one of us is driving. Adds a little bit of safety into it, but it definitely could be easier with a 5000
Yeah.
on a RAM mount.
So actually, this is a good kind of point to transition into, Levi. So you're talking about safety. I mean, Tyler, I know you've done a lot of kind of surveying out in the field, and Levi, same for you pretty much. I mean, when you talk about using the SmoothRide to scan, to say a section of 5 miles of road, what is the time difference between having that SmoothRide system versus doing a traditional survey?
I'll bring up a project we've kind of worked on with a customer, just kind of get them set up to run in SmoothRide themselves. We scanned about 13 miles. It was divided highway, 2 lanes on each side. We scanned the whole thing in about 4.5, 5 hours from the time we got started. So we collected a whole lot of data, could really model that road. I mean, knew down to precision. What was unique about that, we went back to the office after I processed the data, going through the training, and the owner of the company, I could tell him how deep his milling machine was running because we scanned over where they'd already milled, and you could see the asphalt lip. So it was unique to be able to, measure that just from a scan and be able to give that information back. And the guy I was with, he said it would have taken his crews weeks to go through there because, I mean, how many 50-feet cross-sections come up in a 13-mile road, and they're not just shooting edge of pavement, center line, edge of pavement, because it's divided highway. So they're having to hit the shoulder, the edge of pavement, the center lines, the ditches, all that. Whereas all we did was just sit in the truck and drive and collected all of that information.
Yeah. Tyler, any stories from your side?
I mean, we've had a few that have gone about like that, where it's just a long stretch of roadway, and a big thing is the traffic control. I mean, you just can't get that kind of traffic control as you can with just driving that RDM1 and not having to worry about it at all.
Sure, because you're talking about closing a lane of traffic down versus now you're just sitting in your truck and driving it
Yep.
normally.
Yeah, I mean, you can go, I wouldn't say highway speeds, but you can go fast enough to where you can be safe on the highway. If we're really worried about traffic, we'll scan at night, but that's about as far as it goes. We don't ever have to actually close a lane or anything like that anymore.
And I mean, the big thing with speed, like Tyler's talking about, if you do have to scan a major highway where you've got to run at 70 just to keep from getting ran over by cars, you would just make more passes. Because what happens when you speed that scan up, what's going to happen is your cross sections start getting farther and farther apart. So instead of being 3 inches, we might be 10 inches. Well, now we just scan 5 times now, so you kind of fill in that little bit of information. Or you could pick a better time today, like Tyler talked about, scan at 3 a.m. That's the nice thing about LiDAR is it's not based on light source or anything like that, so we can scan any time of the day.
Yeah.
As long as you got a dry road. I wouldn't be scanning a wet road or anything like that, but
Fair enough. So water does play into it, though.
it does.
Not that you shouldn't be scanning in water, but how does that play into, how does that going to affect your data?
So what I've seen is, because when we first got it, I mean, we tried everything. We tried just going out right after a little rainstorm. And what would happen is water would get kicked up by the wheels, and it would reflect the laser back to it, from the actual rooster tails coming up from the tires.
Those tires, yep.
Yeah, so that's what ended up happening whenever we tried to do it in a wet condition. I'm sure dust would have a similar effect, but maybe not as pronounced.
Yeah, I mean, and the nice thing about RDM1, I've had it happen to me. I've been scanning on a dusty road, and it'll actually prompt up and give you an error that your lens for your LiDAR is too dirty. So basically, you can pause your scan, wipe it off, and move on if that does happen.
Gotcha.
Because, I mean, sometimes you might just have, somebody's watered their grass, and you got a little trail of water going across. We're not really concerned about that, but it could affect their scanner if it picks up water.
So Levi, when we were talking about this system earlier, you mentioned kind of being able to go in and put kind of flags where you may have encountered an issue or something on the road. Can you talk about how you can highlight, and we'll get into the data processing here in the next video, but I wanted to hit, since we're talking about scanning now, what were you exactly talking about when you say you can add a marker to the scan?
So within the RDM1 Collect, the software that kind of runs the scanner and collects all the data, basically, it's like our field collection software, basically. You can set little flags and stuff on there, so if you come across a manhole and you want to mark it, that way when you get into that data process and you know where those manholes are, If you're doing anything with control, just for verification, you can mark those control points. I've used it to do the start and end of a project because I like to start scanning maybe 100 feet before I get to the start of my project, but at least I know where that start of the project is. I'll hit start. Or say I go into an area where I might lose GPS, I might mark it just so that when I am in that data process and I can kind of make a visual note, basically like a field book that says, hey, I ran into a problem here. That way you can kind of inspect that data or maybe help interpolate what's going on.
So Tyler, I know there's the capability within the software to go back and replay your scan before you take it back to the office. Can you just give an example of how that could come into play when you're out in the field taking a scan?
Yeah, so inside of the Collect software, there's a Playback option. And you simply click that, it asks you for where you saved your file at, you open it up, and you can actually play the scan back from start to finish. If there's any errors that popped up, it'll actually show you what those errors were, what they said exactly. I've used it in a heavily tree-covered area where I kept on losing GPS. Had some weird looking data in the software, so I went back and played it back, and I could see the errors popping up for the GPS itself right there. So it's kind of a nice feature just for troubleshooting of, why something might look a little bit off.
Gotcha. It saves you time too, I imagine, right? Because you're not taking it back to the office, processing it, realizing you're having an issue. You can kind of correct it right there on the spot.
Yeah, you can go out and add some data to it, and since your base position hasn't moved, it can still be tied in with the same data set.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
And speaking of that base moving, that base station is the important thing because when we do get into it later on in these videos talking about the paver, we actually go back out and use the exact same base station we scan to, so everything's relative to itself. So it's a big thing is protecting that base station location, also adding to the point of putting two. That way, if you got a week and a half before you get out there to start paving again, say your base point gets knocked out, you've actually got another point that you can rely off of.
So Tyler, I know obviously a lot of the guys are going to be running the scanner with a truck. Are you limited to just using a truck, or can you put it on, say, a van or a car?
You could put it on another vehicle. Benchmark would manufacture a mount for something like that, I'm sure. I think I've heard stories of it being used on golf carts with Topcon.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, that's the nice thing about the Topcon mount. It's very adaptable. It's not just vehicle specific. The only vehicle specific part you get to is actually the receiver hitch mount. So they've got different ones for Ford or Chevrolet, stuff like that. They've even got an SUV mount. So if you wanted to mount it on like an Equinox or something, as long as it has that receiver hitch that can hold that tube, that's the big thing on it. And also talking about the wheel encoder a little bit, the lug nuts that go on that wheel encoder is universal, so they actually can fit anything. You don't have to take lug nuts off. They actually fit over the top of a lug nut with kind of a compression type fitting, which makes it very easy to take on and off of vehicles and being able to pass that scanner back and forth within a company. So.
Gotcha. And that kind of plays into, we talked about getting it set up, making sure that you're doing all those measurements correctly. You got to measure the wheel encoder, and I guess you got to measure off the rear axle to the hitch or where the scanner is. So you got to do that for every single vehicle. So when you talk about getting a custom hitch, you got to make sure you don't just take your standard measurements, right? You got to make sure you take the time to measure correctly each vehicle and the hitch and the distance.
Mm-hmm. And everything's based off of not the hitch mount. Everything's based off of an actual mark on that scanner. So Topcon put kind of a center point there that everything's based off of. And then the software knows that sensor's that far ahead of the point, that far below the point. So they make it very easy to do that. I mean, I would say 30 minutes to an hour, you could probably have it set up running on a vehicle. So.
Yeah, I think the last time I set one up was about right at 30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had them take up to an hour just depending on the vehicle or what you got to do to make it work. Like, we had a guy with a bed cover, so we had to kind of think on our toes of how can we make this work and keep your bed cover there, because you can't just tell somebody, hey, you got to lose your bed cover. So.
Yeah. So that is the first part of the SmoothRide system. That's basically just getting your system set up, getting on the job site, and then getting your scan done. We are going to dive into the data processing piece, in addition to taking that data and putting it into your paving and milling machine. Tyler and Levi are going to join us for both of those. Certainly appreciate you guys tuning in and watching. If you have any questions or want more information on the system, feel free to reach out to us at benchmarksupply.com or give us a call at the number on your screen. Thank you.